I'm about to share with you the secret to charging what you're worth while avoiding unwanted opinions from customers and simultaneously increasing your sales. I didn't think it was possible until I implemented this one thing into my business, and it instantly worked. In the last video, we talked about my made-to-order clothing company and how I went from having a side hustle of sewing clothes to sewing clothes from home full-time. But the question here is, how did I actually get to a point where that was possible? Well, it all starts with pricing your handmade products. This can feel daunting because prices and judgment are very closely attached. Have you ever walked into a store and thought, wow, that's super overpriced? Well, newsflash, when you own your own business, people will actually say that to your face. The first time it happens, you're probably going to feel really uncomfortable and you're not going to know what to say. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there will be people who understand your craft. And they'll say things like, wow, that product is really underpriced. No matter if someone thinks you're charging too much for your products or you're charging too little for your products, it's never a comfortable conversation. Trust me, I've been there. I want you to start thinking about knowing your worth. But what does that really mean? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean pulling your prices out of thin air because it feels like the right price or because that's the price that you would feel comfortable paying. In my opinion, that's a surefire way for you and your business to fail. Knowing your worth means creating a price point with detailed intention. And by doing this, you should be able to extract all the difficult and uncomfortable feelings associated with product pricing. We're going to go about this in a very matter-of-fact way, so there's no guesswork. So let's use one of the sewing patterns that I've made as an example. This is the puff sleeve tie top that I self-drafted. It's my favorite handmade piece in my wardrobe and it sells super well with my customers. I charge $125 for one of these tops, and this is exactly how I break it down. Now let's start with the price of fabric. I need 1 1/4 yards to make the top, and at the dead stock fabric store that I purchased from, that costs about $7. Next, we'll consider notions, which would include things like buttons, zippers, elastic, thread, and so on and so forth. I estimate about $1 to include the thread and elastic needed to make the top. Next, we need to assign a dollar amount to how much your time is worth. This is going to be personal for everyone, but please make sure you're paying yourself a living wage. If you have no idea what your time is worth or where to start, try Google searching the minimum wage in your local area. Now, I don't really recommend that you pay yourself minimum wage because most people who are paid minimum wage are barely scraping by, but it might be a good starting point for you to figure out the price point that's good for you. In my case, I paid myself $25 an hour based on my experience and where I live. Now, going back to the garment, it takes me about 3 hours to make this top. So we're going to multiply my hourly wage of $25 by 3 hours, and that is $75. Now we're going to add the $7 for fabric and the $1 for notions, and that puts us at $83. At face value, it makes sense to charge for your time and materials. But what about all the other things involved in owning a business that aren't as tangible? For me, that includes things like yearly machine maintenance, the time it took me to source the materials, the machines themselves, which were many thousands of dollars, not to mention taxes that I have to pay every year, or the time it took me to price the pattern, and that's just scratching the surface of other business expenses. There are so many things involved in owning a business. To account for these expenses, most businesses in the fashion industry have a 150% markup. But my brand isn't huge and doesn't nearly have the same amount of expenses as a business that has employees, so I choose to do a 50% markup. So back to the math, let's do 50% of $83. That equals $41.50. Now we're going to add that $41.50 back to $83, and that equals $124.50. For simplicity's sake, I call it $125. Now what you've just done is calculated the price of your product based on time, materials, and your standard markup. That's exactly how I price every single one of my handmade goods. I go about it very objectively and put aside any fear of customers' opinions, because I know that in order to create a sustainable company, I need to pay myself a living wage, and I have to cover all the normal expenses that are necessary to run my brand. Now, I promised you that my secret to pricing handmade products would help avoid unwanted opinions from customers and increase your sales. So how exactly are we going to do that? Well, it's actually really simple. All you have to do is be very transparent with your customers about every detail that goes into pricing your products, but do it in a way that's strategic. You're not going to want to explain yourself every time someone is surprised by your price, and you shouldn't have to. Instead, make a price tag that speaks for you. Here's the price tag that I use. It goes over every detail that I factor into my price. So now instead of people being outraged when they see my price, they have understanding of all of the time and care that goes into making handmade garments. After implementing these price tags into my business, it made a world of a difference, and I had overwhelmingly positive feedback. My sales increased because people recognized all my hard work and they wanted to support it. I also never had a customer be rude to my face again. They could no longer make condescending comments about my price because they could clearly see the time and effort that went into creating the garment. But actually, the best part about these price tags is that they spark some of the most amazing conversations. After seeing my new price tags, customers would always ask if they could take pictures of the price tags because they thought they were so cool. They told me how they had never seen anything like it, and they would have never known the time and effort that goes into creating a garment unless I had made these tags. It also sparked conversations about the prices of fast fashion companies because people would ask, how can I purchase a shirt for $10 that has 150% markup on it? Well, the short answer is that the person who made the top isn't being paid a living wage. People also ask about my 50% markup and what that includes. And that gives me the ability to educate them on what goes on behind the scenes of a small business, which ultimately helps other small business owners be more appreciated by their customers. Now, even if I wasn't front and center to answer all of those questions, my price tags help people instantly appreciate all the work that goes into my garments. And their appreciation often directly correlates to sales. Also, if anyone were ever to say anything unkind about my prices these days, I can comfortably and kindly remind them that I need to pay myself a living wage just like everyone else. And it's 100% okay if my products aren't within their budget. Truthfully, people who talk like that aren't my target audience in the first place. And there's no use wasting my time on someone who doesn't fall in my target audience. Now that you know my secret to pricing handmade products, you'll probably also want to know how to create a successful pop-up shop. That's the next video in this series, so be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.